What if I told you some spirits never left their graves, and tonight they might be watching you? If you love ghost stories, hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video so we can bring you even more terrifying tales. Subscribe, like, share to keep the ghosts coming. The water carried stories long before human voices began to shape them. In the canals of Xochimilco, where the remnants of ancient lakes stretched like veins through the southern edge of Mexico City, time does not move as it does in the streets above. Here, the hours drift like lilies on the surface, sluggish and luminous, whispering of a world that once was and never fully disappeared. Long before the city rose with its cacophony of horns, neon, and concrete, there was water, endless and breathing, a womb from which both gods and ghosts were born. It is here, in this liminal territory between life and decay, that the island of the dolls waits. At first glance, it is not unlike other chinampas, those floating gardens built by the Aztecs centuries ago. Fertile rafts of soil that once fed empires, yet no cornstalks grow tall here, no blossoms reach for the sun. Instead, the trees drip with dolls, thousands of them, hung from branches and nailed to trunks, strung across wires and balanced on rooftops. Dolls with missing eyes, with cracked porcelain faces, with hair matted by rain and time. Dolls whose mouths gape open as though mid-scream, and dolls whose silence is more terrible than any cry could ever be. But before the dolls, there was the swamp, and before the swamp, there were the whispers. The people of Xochimilco have always spoken of the water with reverence and fear. Fishermen tell of shadows swimming just beyond the light of their lanterns. Lovers recount hearing laughter drifting across the reeds, though no one was near. Children are warned never to answer when they hear their names called from the canals at night, for the voice may not belong to the living. And woven into these tales is the figure of La Llorona, the weeping woman, who wanders riverbanks in search of the children she drowned in madness centuries ago. Her cry is said to carry through the mist, chilling the blood of those who hear it, a reminder that water remembers every death it has swallowed. The island of the dolls grew from that soil of belief. The man at its heart, Don Julian Santana, was not a visionary nor a prophet. He was, in many ways, ordinary, a man who sought solitude among the canals, perhaps to escape the noise of the city or the weight of human company. But solitude has a way of magnifying the unseen. In silence, every rustle becomes a voice, every ripple a presence, every shadow a possible ghost. The legend says he found her body in the water, a girl drowned, hair spread like black seaweed around her pale face. Some say he tried to save her, that he reached into the water too late, feeling her slip beyond his grasp like a fish escaping the net. Others insist he never touched her at all, only stumbled upon her lifeless form drifting against the reeds. Yet there are those who claim there was no body, no girl, only the doll he discovered soon after, caught in the roots, bloated by water, its glassy eyes reflecting the sun like two small mirrors. What matters is not which version is true, but what Don Julian believed. And he believed he had seen death, and that the doll was a sign. So he hung the doll in a tree, as an offering, as protection, as acknowledgement. But when one offering is made, more must follow. The water whispered still. The girl, whether real or imagined, lingered in his mind. And slowly, methodically, his island began to change. Imagine the first days, when the branches still stretched bare and green over the water. One doll hanging like an omen. Then another, salvaged from the market, its dress torn but its plastic face intact. Then another, dragged from a garbage heap, head missing, arms bent at unnatural angles. Slowly, the collection grew, a population of effigies gathering in silence. Some say he placed them to ward off the spirit of the drowned child. Others claim he placed them to honor her, to give her companions, so she would not wander alone. Whatever the reason, the dolls multiplied until they consumed the island itself. To visitors, it appeared grotesque. To Don Julian, it was sanctuary. But the swamp has a way of feeding on human devotion. What begins as ritual becomes obsession, and what begins as protection becomes prison. Don Julian began to hear whispers at night, voices tangled in the rustle of the trees. He said the dolls moved, their heads turning in the dark, their eyes following him as he walked. He believed the drowned girl spoke to him through them, her spirit restless, hungry, never appeased. And perhaps she did. The people of Xochimilco began to whisper to boatmen, spoke of strange sounds when they passed the island at night, the cries of children, the laughter of a girl, the low voice of a man muttering prayers to no one. Visitors told of feeling watched, of sudden chills despite the summer heat, of dreams that followed them long after they returned home. The island was no longer just a place. It had become a presence, a thing alive in the imagination of all who beheld it. In 2001, the story reached its final twist. Don Julian was found floating in the very canal where he claimed the girl had drowned decades earlier. His body drifted among the reeds, eyes open to the sky, as if answering a call long whispered through the swamp. To his family, it was tragedy. To believers, it was proof. The girl had claimed him. The water had demanded its due, and the dolls had not saved him after all. Now, the island belongs to the world. Tourists arrive daily, their Trajaneras brightly painted boats drifting toward the eerie silhouette of trees hung with bodies of dolls. Guides spin the tale with relish, their voices hushed, their eyes glancing toward the water as though the girl herself might be listening. Visitors step onto the soil and feel the weight of 1,000 stares pressing down on them. Some bring offerings, adding to the macabre forest. Others cannot stay long, retreating quickly to the safety of the boats, eager to put distance between themselves and the silent multitude. Yet the dolls remain. They hang in rain and sun, their faces cracked by weather, their limbs rotting, their hair matted with moss. Some smile with eerie cheer, others leer with hollow sockets, and still others gape in permanent screams. Together, they form a choir of silence more terrifying than any scream, for silence can hold eternity, and eternity is what haunts the island most of all. And so begins the tale of La Isla de las Muñecas, a story not only of dolls and death, but of the way belief can shape reality, of how grief and solitude can build shrines that outlast their makers, of how water remembers. It is a story that belongs not only to Xochimilco, but to the world. For every culture knows that where there is water, there are ghosts, and where there are ghosts, there are those who will give them form. Here, on this island, the form is dolls. They sway gently in the wind, whispering secrets with every creak of rope and wood. They wait in silence, gazes fixed on the horizon, as if anticipating your arrival. And when you step onto the soil, when the mud clings to your shoes and the reeds rustle like voices in your ear, you will know the island is watching. The dolls are watching, and perhaps, somewhere in the swamp, so is she. This is not just a story. This is the beginning. The island does not reveal itself all at once. It seeps into you slowly, like dampness in your bones. At first, it is only a trick of the imagination, a sense of being watched, the faint feeling of company when there is none. But as the hours stretch and the swamp darkens, the dolls begin to breathe. Or perhaps it is not the dolls at all. Perhaps it is the swamp itself, wearing them like masks, boring their faces to peer back at those who dare to look. When dusk falls over Xochimilco, the canals turn into mirrors. The surface of the water, once scattered with light, becomes black and infinite, reflecting only the lanterns of passing boats and the fractured silhouettes of dolls hanging overhead. The air grows thick, saturated with the smell of wet earth and decay. Crickets begin their chorus, frogs answer with guttural notes, and somewhere in the reeds, something else joins the symphony, a whisper, faint and childlike, carried on the wind. Visitors tell of hearing her before they see her, the drowned girl, whose existence is still debated, whose death was never recorded, but whose presence is undeniable. Sometimes she calls a name, though never the name of anyone alive. Sometimes she laughs, the sound high and fragile, like glass about to shatter, and sometimes she only weeps. The sound drifts across the water, impossible to place, near and far at once. Those who hear it say the dolls move as the sound passes, swaying without wind, their heads tilting as if to listen. The dolls are not mere ornaments. Each carries something of the swamp inside it. Some say they are vessels, traps for wandering souls, holding spirits like glass jars hold fireflies. Others believe they are mouths through which the drowned girl speaks, her voice fractured into thousands of echoes. Still others insist that Don Julian's spirit lives among them, stretched thin across their plastic faces, condemned to watch over the island forever. And yet, there are moments when it seems the dolls are more than vessels. They are eyes. Eyes for something greater, something beneath the water. Ancient and restless, fishermen who work near the island whisper of shadows that move against the current, shapes that are neither fish nor plant. They speak of eyes opening below the surface, glowing faintly like embers in the dark. When their boats drift too close, they feel the tug of unseen hands against the hull, pulling, testing, inviting them to join the drowned. They cross themselves quickly, muttering prayers, and row away as fast as their arms allow. One story tells of a young man who mocked the island. He arrived on a trajinera with friends, drunk on mezcal and bravado, laughing at the dolls, daring the ghosts to show themselves. He tore one from a tree, holding it high as a trophy, and shouted into the night, "Is this your child? Come, take her back." His laughter echoed across the water, sharp and cruel. But as the boat left the island, silence fell over the group. The young man had vanished. The boat had not rocked. The water had not splashed. One moment he was there, mocking, grinning, waving the doll in the air. The next, he was gone. Some said he had fallen silently into the canal, swallowed without a sound. Others whispered he had been pulled, claimed, taken by the same force that had once claimed the girl and Don Julian. His body was never found. The doll, however, was later seen hanging again from the same tree, swaying in the wind. For the people of Xochimilco, such stories are not entertainment, they are warnings. Do not mock the island. Do not disturb the dolls. Do not linger after dark. And yet, curiosity is stronger than caution. Paranormal investigators arrive with cameras, microphones, and bravado. They set up their equipment, eager to capture proof. But what they capture is rarely what they expect. Recordings filled with static carry voices, faint and desperate, whispering in languages no one speaks. Cameras reveal shadows that pass behind trees though no one walks there, and in the silence between questions, investigators feel the weight of breath on their necks, the brush of small fingers against their skin. One team claimed to have recorded the sound of children's footsteps in the mud, circling their camp as they slept. Another swore they saw a doll turn its head to follow them, its eyes reflecting red light, though no lantern burned. A woman fainted when she felt a hand slip into hers, small and cold, holding tight as though begging her not to leave. But perhaps the most chilling tales come from those who bring offerings. Tourists often bring dolls of their own, gifts for the island, tokens to appease whatever lingers there. Some tie them carefully to trees, whispering prayers as they do, but others, more reckless, toss them carelessly into the branches or drop them into the mud. Those visitors often report strange dreams afterward, dreams of drowning, of water filling their lungs, of dolls leaning over them with wide, unblinking eyes. A few claim to have awoken with bruises on their arms, in the shape of tiny fingers. The haunting of the island is not loud. It is not the crashing violence of doors slamming or objects flying. It is quiet, patient, insidious. It is the dread that seeps into your bones when you realize every face is watching you. It is the silence that deepens after the laughter of your companions fades, leaving only the creak of rope and the sound of water. It is the certainty that something is beneath you, just below the surface, waiting for the right moment to rise. And always, the dolls, their cracked faces, their broken bodies, their endless stares. They dangle in silence, yet their silence is alive. It is not absence, it is presence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you begin to imagine words within it, whispers curling around your thoughts. The locals know this silence. They have lived with it for generations. To them, the island is not merely haunted, it is sacred. A place where the veil is thin, where spirits walk freely, where the drowned girl and Don Julian are only two among many. Some bring candles, lighting them in the mud, their flames flickering against the hollow faces of the dolls. Others leave offerings of food or coins, as though paying toll to the spirits. A few even speak directly to the dolls, asking for protection, for guidance, for forgiveness. But there are also those who fear the island deeply. Some boatmen refuse to approach it after dusk, no matter the price offered. They tell of boats that have vanished, of oars slipping from hands as though pulled away, of compasses spinning wildly in their cases. They insist the island grows larger at night, its trees stretching higher, its shadows deepening, as though the dolls themselves are multiplying when no one watches. And in the heart of it all, the girl waits. Some describe her as a child, small and frail, with hair dripping like black weeds, her dress clinging to her skin. Others see her as older, her features blurred, her eyes hollow like the dolls that surround her. A few claim she appears as a shadow among shadows, a shape that moves against the moonlight without sound. But all agree on one thing: when she appears, the dolls grow still. The wind ceases, the swamp holds its breath, and every living thing feels the weight of her gaze. For this is not a simple haunting. This is not one spirit tethered to one place. This is a convergence, a knot in the fabric of the world where sorrow, devotion, and death have woven themselves together into something greater. The island of the dolls is not haunted because of the girl or because of Don Julian. It is haunted because the swamp itself has taken their grief, their voices, their memories, and grown fat upon them. It has birthed something vast and nameless, wearing dolls as its mask, water as its body, silence as its voice. And once you hear that voice, you never truly leave the island. The deeper one lingers on the island, the thinner the veil becomes. What begins as whispers and shadows eventually hardens into presence, undeniable and suffocating. It is not sudden nor lightning strike, no violent crash, but rather a slow, inexorable tightening, like a noose slipping around the neck, tightening with every breath. On the third night, those who dared to remain pilgrims, wanderers, spoke of the change. By day, the dolls are grotesque curiosities, cracked faces grinning or grimacing beneath the sun. By twilight, they are watchmen, leaning forward in eerie attention, their shadows stretching across the mud like fingers. But by night, when darkness swallows the swamp and the stars blink uncertainly through the mist, the dolls awaken. It begins with a sound, not loud, not violent, but the faintest of murmurs, a child's hum, a nursery rhyme half remembered, carried on the wind. The melody winds through the trees, sweet and chilling, as if sung from the throat of someone who no longer breathes. Those who hear it cannot help but follow the sound, stepping deeper into the island's tangle of roots and effigies. The dolls seem to lean closer, swaying in rhythm, their glass eyes gleaming with reflected moonlight. The air itself changes. The damp smell of earth becomes sharper, tinged with rot and something metallic, like blood. The mist thickens, curling low around ankles, tugging at footsteps like invisible hands. And the silence breaks in strange ways. Sudden bursts of laughter that vanish instantly, sobs that echo across the water with no source, whispers in a language no ear has ever known. Then come the shadows, not the shadows of branches or reeds, but figures that move independently, slipping between trees, darting just beyond sight. They watch from the edges, always at the edge, until one realizes they are circling, drawing closer, closing in like predators testing the courage of their prey. One investigator swore that he saw Don Julian himself among them, a hunched figure, water dripping from his clothes, eyes hollow, carrying a doll in his hand as though it were a lantern. The man shuffled between the trees, lips moving in silent prayer, dolls dangling in his wake like mourners at a funeral procession. When the investigator called out, the figure turned, and where a face should have been, there was only the porcelain mask of a doll, its cracked grin stretching wider than human flesh should allow. The figure dissolved into mist, but the prayer lingered, whispered in the man's ear long after the apparition vanished. Others saw the girl. She does not appear suddenly, but gradually, like a reflection forming in dark glass. First, the sound of water dripping, then the impression of hair floating, spreading like ink in water. Then the pale oval of a face, eyes open but clouded, staring upward from beneath the surface. Some claim she rises slowly, breaking the water without a ripple, standing on the canal as though it were solid ground, her dress clinging to her thin body. Others say she never emerges, only stares from beneath, her gaze locking with theirs until they feel their lungs filled with imagined water, choking them with every breath. One night, a group of travelers, 5 in total, attempted to record her presence with cameras and recorders. They gathered near the heart of the island, where the dolls were thickest, their faces a grotesque gallery of horror. The group sat in a circle, candles flickering, microphones buzzing. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just after midnight, the dolls began to turn. One by one, their heads shifted, ever so slightly, until all faced the group. The air dropped in temperature, the candles guttered, and the sound of children's laughter filled the circle, overlapping, dozens of voices weaving together into a cacophony of joy that was not joy at all. The youngest member of the group screamed, swatting at her arm as though struck. When they pulled back her sleeve, 5 small bruises shaped like a child's hand bloomed on her skin. The recorders captured nothing but static, yet through the static pulsed a rhythm like a heartbeat, loud and steady. It grew louder until the devices burst into silence. Batteries drained in an instant. The group fled, abandoning equipment, rowing frantically through the canals. When they looked back, the dolls swayed violently, though no wind stirred, as if waving them away, mocking their terror. There are stories older still, told by the boatmen who know the swamp's secrets. Stories of entire Trajan-era flat-bottomed boats vanishing into the mist, never seen again. Stories of voices luring travelers deeper, calling their names in tones so familiar it was impossible not to answer. Some say the island itself moves, drifting slowly through the canals at night, seeking new souls to ensnare. Others claim that the swamp has no bottom near the island, only a chasm that swallows anything that dares sink to deep. And always, the dolls watch. Their silence becomes unbearable, louder than screams. It presses against the skull, forcing thoughts that are not one's own, memories that do not belong to the living. People speak of seeing flashes, glimpses of the drowned girl's final moments, of Don Julian's lonely prayers, of other deaths long forgotten. Each doll is a memory, each face a vessel of sorrow. And when enough sorrow gathers, it spills over into the living. There are nights when the island does not allow departure. Oars grow heavy, refusing to cut through the water. Compasses spin, lights vanish in the mist. Travelers row for hours only to find themselves circling back, the dolls waiting with patient smiles. On such nights, the swamp seems endless, an ocean without horizon, and the island its only anchor. It is in these moments that the truth becomes clear. The island of the dolls is not haunted, is haunting. It does not passively hold spirits. It creates them, feeds them, multiplies them. Grief is its soil, solitude its sunlight, devotion its rain. Every doll hung upon its trees is not an offering but a seed, and from those seeds sprout voices, shadows, memories. The island is not the victim of tragedy. It is the womb of it, and when the climax comes, when the veil tears completely, the swamp itself breathes. The water ripples without wind, the trees creak like bending spines, the dolls sway in unison. The voices rise, a chorus of children crying, laughing, screaming, whispering. Shadows converge, forming shapes too vast to name, wings of darkness stretching across the canals. The drowned girl rises, her hair dripping across her face, eyes glowing faintly like embers beneath the water. Don Julian walks beside her, his doll-faced visage lit by unseen fire. Together, they stand as guardians of something far greater, something that cannot be named, only felt the presence of the swamp itself. Ancient, eternal, hungry. In that moment, the living know fear, not as an emotion but as a truth that the world is not theirs alone, that the dead walk among them, that grief and memory and devotion can birth gods of sorrow. The dolls are no longer dolls. They are eyes, they are mouths, they are the fingers of something vast and unseen, reaching through the veil to claim what it desires. And once you have seen this once, you have stood on the island during its awakening. You will never again believe that the world is ordinary. You will carry the island with you, in your dreams, in your reflections, in the silence that waits at the edge of sleep. For the island does not let go. It never lets go. The night after the storm did not bring clarity. It brought silence, thick, choking silence that clung to the survivors of the island, like cobwebs that could not be brushed away. The water had calmed, but it was darker than before, heavy with debris, branches, shattered wood, pieces of dolls that had once hung in grotesque pride from the trees. Now they floated like corpses on a battlefield, drifting aimlessly, their painted eyes staring upward, reflecting the pale moon that peeked through tattered clouds. The group, Maria, Luis, and the others who had made it through the tempest sat huddled near the skeletal ruins of Don Julian's shack. The air smelled of rot and iron, as though the swamp itself had bled during the night. No one spoke. To speak was to invite attention, and they were no longer sure that attention was something human. Luis kept fingering the rosary at his neck, whispering prayers that sounded more like pleas than incantations. Maria, who had once considered herself skeptical, stared into the water, where the reflection of a doll's head bobbed. Its hair was tangled with weeds, its eye sockets black hollows that seemed deeper than they should be. They all knew something had shifted. The dolls were no longer just objects of terror. They had become vessels, hosts for something ancient that had decided to wake, pulled from the depths of the swamp by their presence, their fear, their blood. In the days that followed, survivors left the island, but they did not leave it behind. In the markets of Xochimilco, vendors whispered about travelers seen wandering with strange expressions, blank stares, as if their minds were tethered to something unseen. Some claimed that when these survivors passed, the dolls in the stalls tilted their heads slightly, as though recognizing kin. Maria returned to her small home in Mexico City, but it was no sanctuary. At night, she would hear the soft creak of wood, as though ropes swayed in windless air. She dreamed of waterlogged dolls standing at the foot of her bed, their cracked mouths opening in unison to whisper her name. Each morning, she found her apartment colder, damper, as though the swamp itself was bleeding into the city. Luis did not last long. He was found wandering the canals of Xochimilco one dawn, whispering about eyes in the water. His body bore rope burns around the neck, though no rope was ever found. Authorities marked it as suicide, but those who had seen the marks said it looked more like a child's hands had strangled him. Small and unyielding, the others disappeared one by one. Their names ceased to matter, for their fates were all drawn into the same vortex. The dolls had followed them home. Word of the haunting spread across Mexico and then beyond. Paranormal investigators came, armed with cameras and recording devices. Skeptics came, eager to debunk the stories. Tourists came, hoping to feel the thrill of danger without consequence. The island welcomed them all. Voices were recorded that no human throat could shape, high-pitched cries of children interspersed with guttural growls. Photographs showed dolls turning their heads between frames. Boats returning from the island arrived heavier than when they left, their decks littered with water and mud, though no rain had fallen. Those who mocked the legend, most loudly, often suffered the swiftest ends. A journalist from Spain scoffed during an interview, declaring the dolls nothing more than rotting trash in trees. Days later, he was found in his hotel bathtub, drowned, though the tub was half empty. On the mirror, written in grime, were the words, "Play with us." In time, the island was no longer seen as a site of curiosity, but as a living shrine, a place where something old and unspeakable had rooted itself. Locals stopped referring to it as Isla de las Muñecas and began calling it La Isla de los Espíritus, the Island of Spirits. Boats refused to dock too closely after sunset. Families whispered prayers when passing through the canals, dropping offerings into the water, candy, flowers, even children's toys, hoping to appease whatever lingered there. But appeasement was never the point. The island did not crave gifts. It craved attention, presence, memory. The more people feared it, the stronger it grew. Years later, Maria could bear it no longer. The dreams had worsened, bleeding into waking hours. Dolls appeared in places they should not be, in her kitchen sink, on her balcony, inside her locked wardrobe. Their cracked faces always watched, their eyes following her with patient hunger. She returned to the island, convinced that only there could she find relics or answers. The island greeted her like a long-lost daughter. The dolls swayed, though the air was still. Their eyes gleamed with something wet, something alive. The shack had rotted almost entirely into the ground, but the tree from which Don Julian had hung dolls for decades stood strong, its bark scarred, its branches thick with offerings. At the base of the tree lay a doll Maria had never seen before. Small, pale, its mouth sewn shut with coarse black thread. She reached down to touch it, trembling, and in that moment, the whispers ceased. For the first time in years, silence felt pure. Then the thread snapped. The doll's mouth opened, wide, impossibly wide, and from it poured a flood of voices, hundreds of voices, children and adults, laughter and screams, prayers and curses, all layered until they formed a sound not of this earth. Maria fell back, clutching her ears, but the sound was not in her ears. It was inside her skull, inside her soul. The swamp water rippled, though no wind blew. Every doll on the island turned its head toward her. Their eyes glowed faintly, like embers in the dark, and Maria understood. The dolls were not cursed. They were the curse. Every rope tied, every broken toy hung in those trees had been another doorway. Don Julian had not protected the island. He had fed it. Each doll was a vessel, a house for a spirit, and together they were legion. What became of Maria after that night was never truly known. Some say she drowned in the canals. Her body never recovered. Others say she still wanders the island, a living doll with eyes that no longer blink. Tourists whisper about a woman seen among the trees, holding a doll that looks exactly like her, its mouth sewn shut with black thread. The legend has no ending because the swamp has no ending. The dolls multiply, the island grows, and the spirits that dwell there are not confined to Xochimilco. They travel in stories, in photographs, in memory. Every time someone whispers about the island of the dolls, every time a skeptic laughs or a believer shudders, the curse tightens its grip. The dolls do not need to move from their perches. They only need to be remembered. And you, reading these words, have already given them what they want. Tonight, when you turn off your light, listen carefully. You may hear the faint creak of rope. You may see a small shadow where no child should be. And if you wake in the dead of night to find a doll sitting in your room, staring, mouth slightly open, know this: the island has found you. The island of the dolls is not just in Mexico. It is wherever fear resides, wherever memory keeps alive the stories of the drowned girl, the hermit caretaker, the countless spirits that now dance between the trees. The swamp is eternal. The dolls are waiting, and the ghosts, they do not rest, they play forever.